Hello and welcome to the Friendship News Hour presented to you by Bummerdude Media. Today is May the 7th, 2021, and I am Frank Huerta. Yeah, I checked my you're Alex, by the way. You're Alex Kenzie.
That's
I
me.
checked my Dogecoin just right now. She's up,
Look at it.
brother.
Yes, she is.
She took a step down, but she refueled and she's back on her way to the moon.
I'm really curious if by Saturday when Elon hosts Saturday Night Live, if it's going to be to $1, man. That'd be pretty insane.
It's wild. Isn't it wild? It's the social engineering of stocks. It's crazy. It's just wealth built on hype. It blows my mind. It's such a beautiful thing to see sometimes, just people taking control of this.
Scary too, though, because I think like 90% of it is owned by like 3 to 5 people, and if they ever sold, the market would drop out. And it's also not backed by the FDIC, so
It's not backed by anything.
yeah.
It's literally just hype. It's what it is. It's just people talking. Like you said, if Elon Musk is on SNL hosting
Mhm.
and decides to mention Dogecoin or does anything to reference it, then it goes up. Like, yeah, that's just hype. It's
Yeah.
wild. Just
Hmm.
like this Ethereum Classic that I have too. I don't know. You invest in this kind of stuff?
I like have just started to like my brother probably like 4 months ago was like Dogecoin, and I'm like, all right, bro, whatever. I'm not taking my financial advice from you, and I should have fucking listened, man, because he's making some good money now off of it. But I bought in on Doge for sure a while back, and it's actually been pretty good. Ethereum, you were just kind of talking about it a couple of days ago, and I bought in small, but I think I missed like the first big jump. Um, you did pretty well with it, right?
With the Classic, there's Ethereum, and then there's Ethereum Classic. It gets real into the weeds,
I don't know
and
that.
if you're not into it, then it's just we're probably just speaking Greek right now. But there's two of them. I guess the Ethereum Classic used to be what Ethereum was. It was just the only one, and then it got hacked. More than 51% of the computer was like hacked by somebody,
Wow.
and you're hearing third degree information right now, but because it got hacked, it dropped, and Ethereum branched off from what is now called Ethereum Classic. So now Ethereum is a branch off of the original one that I guess is more protected. I don't know.
Hmm.
I have no idea, man. I just see it go up, and if I make a good profit, I secure it, sell, and then on to the next.
Yeah. So is that what you like to do? You don't like to hold stocks very long. You like to kind of make your money, sell, move
You
on.
know, if you're gonna, it just depends how long if you're in it to just strike rich off one thing, then you're probably gonna hold, and you're probably not gonna get that much money, right? But like if you're in it to continually make a profit, well, then if you see that you've made 100% profit, then you don't have to sell everything, but sell some of that, give yourself some liquidity, go find something else that you think you can make another 5 to 10% profit on. And as soon as you get these profits, man, don't be afraid to take them because they're profit. And if you do that over time, that's how you build a solid portfolio. So it just kind of depends on if you want to take the time to do it.
Well, I trust you with all of my money, so I'll put all my money in the market on that advice. I suggest all the users to do the same, and just Frank Huerta, financial advisor,
Yes,
and you'll be good.
these statements have been endorsed, and you can send me your credit card information. Um, but Alice, money is not the secret to happiness. We know
Yeah.
what the secret to happiness is,
Mm.
and yeah, it's more or less something that we've already known, just put in different terms, and told by a Finn. And they should know because they've been like 4 years running the happiest country in the world. So we'll talk about that later on.
Mm.
Um, you have a UFO update?
I do just some clarification on stuff from the last episode, just to put some facts in there, and you're not just talking in. Well, I think it's supposed to be, So we'll touch on that.
Ah, yes. Ever the information machine you are, sir. And jobs report out today, and not as rosy as a projection as they thought it might be. Quite a bit lower than the largest estimations. We created 266,000 new jobs. last quarter, and they estimated about 1 million. And so we'll talk about why they were off so bad and what it means going forward. Um,
I've got
and
an update on net neutrality and what's going on in that arena. Kind of haven't heard about it for a while, but yesterday it popped back up in the news with some pretty like interesting, revealing evidence.
what is
Uh,
net neutrality?
we're gonna get into it, Frank. Don't ask these questions ahead of time. You
Well,
need
I'm
to
just
wait.
curious.
You need
I
to
just
wait,
wanted
man.
you to whet my appetite a little bit.
It,
Uh,
it's basically like operating with the internet free as it is now, instead of having new restrictions put in where they could have different tiers and you're spending money for the internet basically on top of what you already pay.
don't we already spend for the internet though?
Yeah. So you want to spend more?
I suppose not.
Yeah. So
I
we'll
suppose
get
not.
into that for sure.
And Joe Biden has granted a waiver for our vaccine patents, and has that'll have some repercussions, long-term repercussions. That'll change the landscape of how we do things in the future. It's sort of an unprecedented move. Not only did it wipe out a lot of money, but it just set a weird precedent for if we ever come across a pandemic like we have now, and we need to race to make a vaccine. Um, we've sort of taken that safety net of a patent away from a
Hmm.
couple companies that have made these vaccines in the name of trying to help out the world. But I think in time it'll look like a short-sighted move. But today we're going to start with Amazon.
Yes, this is a
And
pretty juicy story, man.
they mobilized to unionize, right?
Well, so this is a story that's pretty close to home, as I used to be a member of this union that was trying to organize one of their warehouses, one of Amazon's warehouses in Alabama. The
Roll
union,
damn tide.
which is the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU, for which I was a member for about 3 years, 2.5 years, and actually a union shop steward as well. So I was kind of like the point guy in the store for any kind of discipline, any kind of questions from staff, anything like that.
I see you with a whip.
In a way, yeah.
Who was your employer?
Guitar Center at the time,
Okay.
and we were
Okay.
the first Guitar Center store to unionize. And it was, I mean, it's that fight started years before I even got there. It took them about 3 years to unionize just one store because GC fought them so hard. And it was not pretty. I got to sit in on a couple of the union negotiations, which was awesome. It was really cool to like sit there and like with a couple other employees, with the lawyers from the union, and like put together things that like are still in place now, or things that have branched out to multiple stores, and like protect people. That was really cool. But I also saw like the very dark, evil side of corporate America and the lawyers that they choose to hire, and how good they are at their job, and perhaps how terrible of people they are when they're trying to negotiate against people that are just asking for pretty fair wages, pretty fair things. So and businesses definitely have their view of unions for sure, and probably justifiably so. But from the standpoint of a labor, in most cases, it seems to be there for the right reasons, at least. Our country
So
was
you
certainly built
were
on it.
you were you worked for an employer who wasn't unionized, and then you went through the process of becoming unionized.
Sure. And yeah, let me just stress, I did not start this movement. It started before I got there, but many of the workers, all the workers felt very mistreated by the employer,
Mm-hmm.
with hours, with discipline, just with the way that like they felt like their workplace was. They felt like it was a hostile workplace, and that Guitar Center as a corporation did nothing other than offer them a pretty solid gear discount, to like make it a nice workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And they had all kinds of stuff, man. Their commission system is bogus. Most of the time, it made it so that only like a department like accessories they're making no commission. You fade against your commission, which at the end of the day you make minimum wage, but you work however many hours, you do all this different stuff. You're selling stuff which you should be making commission on from that first sale. But if you don't fade what your hourly wage is for them, then they don't pay you anything, which is garbage. But
What
like
was your
departments like
what
where I
was your
worked in Pro Audio, where it's higher ticket items, you're making your money, you're making decent commission, so it's not a big deal. But for the people that aren't in those positions, they were really screwed.
so what was your dues? How much did it put you back?
$20 every 2 weeks, or no, $20 a month. I'm sorry.
$20 a month, and then
Yep.
you unionize. What?
Uh,
What?
yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a vote that you have to have a certain percentage of the employees. But yeah, I mean, basically, when you become part of the union, it's $20 a month, and you're fully covered. They got us phenomenal health insurance compared to what we used to have at the same price from what we used to pay. They no longer were able to do a lot of the things that they were doing. They completely changed the pay structure, all the commission. Everybody there made money from the very first dollar that they spent or that they sold on that sales floor. It was a great thing. Like it at first, especially, it was like, hell yeah, we won, we did this. This is great. As it went on, as it progressed, you started to see some of the things that were like, okay, this isn't like the rainbows and unicorn story that we thought it was. Like there was opportunity for shitty employees basically to take advantage of the system and not get fired. And that was not cool, especially for me. I got pulled into all of those discipline meetings. And I wasn't getting paid by that union. I was technically paying them to do that job. Like they didn't even break me on my dues. Like I still paid full dues, everything. But I was pulled in multiple times a shift because I basically anytime any management sat down with an employee for any kind of problem, any kind of incident report, and really anything. Like if a manager was sitting with an employee, they wanted union representation there. So I was pulled off the floor constantly. And as someone that makes commission off your sales, that fucks you up big time.
Now you got to see the pros and cons of what unionization might mean,
Sure.
and it seems like the Amazon workers down in Alabama rejected it outright. Like
So yes,
71% that voted no.
yes, but National Labor Relations Board said on Wednesday that the evidence submitted by RWDSU to them was convincing enough and has raised objections to Amazon's conduct prior to this union election that happened in Alabama, and could be grounds for overturning the vote, which very rarely happens. You'd never really see this happen in labor negotiations, in labor votes, elections. It's very rare.
Did they say what the evidence was that they had?
Yes, yeah. So basically, well, just to give you some more info too, the vote count announced on April 9th showed that workers at Amazon's warehouse rejected the union by more than a 2-to-1 margin. The RWDSU submitted nearly 24 objections to their conduct during the election, which it said prevented employees from a free and uncoerced exercise of choice on whether they should become a union or not. Some of the allegations have been as crazy as, and not even allegations, they have proof of this. Right as this all started, the Amazon went to the city, or went to the county, Jefferson County, and asked them to change the timing of the traffic lights. They claimed so that the employees could get out of the parking lot more quickly and that the shift changes would be more efficient. It just happened to coincide with the exact same time that delegates from RWDSU were standing at this traffic light as people came and left their jobs, giving them information about the union because they're not allowed on company property. So Amazon contacted the county and had them shorten that period so that pretty much the light was always green, so that these people are cruising by these people always. They also sent out, what's that?
Is that a shifty move?
Yeah, for sure. They've also alleged that Amazon's agents unlawfully threatened employees with saying that they would close the warehouse if they all joined the union, if the union came to be, and that the company, they have a copy of these emails. They emailed out to all the labor force saying that they would have to lay off 75% of these whole force if this proposed bargaining unit, if this proposed union went through, which is very illegal to do. There were signs all over the place. Yeah, it's like
to send out a memo to your employees to say, hey, listen, if this happens, your work as you know it is going to change drastically because we are going to have the heavy hand of this union kind of setting rules that don't exist right now, and it's going to change. I mean, I don't know the letter, but it seems to me Amazon also has at least should have the right to say, hey, listen, this is not good for you, and here's why.
So labor law is really, there's a lot of gray area on this stuff. There's definitely union busters, even though they don't call themselves that. There are people that are hired. They came into Guitar Center when we worked there. They're hired as a third party company to come in and basically say what you just said legally. Like
Okay.
you're able to say like, hey, there are things that are bad about the union coming here. You know, here, these are the things that are great. We're here to help you guys. You guys can come to us. Most of the time that's bullshit. It's just them trying to not have a union happen because it brings in a lot of bullshit that they have to deal with.
Sure.
But no, a company can't straight up say we're going to close this warehouse if the union comes to be, or we're going to fire 75% of you. Like that's illegal to threaten employees. Like it needs to be a fair vote to where like they've obviously gone to the union, sought out the union because they feel like they have problems. You know, I know that the wage is up to $15, and to be honest with you, I don't know the specific plights of these people. I didn't see what they were complaining about condition wise, but enough so that they went to the RWDSU to find out if they could get help. At that point, Amazon is not allowed to strong arm or try to manipulate the vote in any way. Like
Yeah.
they're allowed to hire these union busters that can explain it legally to them, but they can't do what they did. So
Yeah. Sure. Um, yeah. I mean, it's a difficult choice. Even if you're a worker, man, it's a difficult choice. All opposing factors aside, if you know anything about it, right? You know that the goal or the stated purpose of a union to be in an employer is to represent the workers. And I was part of a union for like 6 months, but I worked for Air Gas where they had the drivers were union. They were part of some union that represented drivers, and they all had to vote for it. And they they went on strike a couple times. And when you go on strike for a company like the one I worked for as a driver, that means all business halts. Nothing gets done.
mhm.
And it was a real tough decision for some of them because they needed to vote on the union line to make it happen. And some of them I knew didn't feel the same way. They felt that they were getting treated fairly. They felt like the raises that were proposed in the previous contract were good. And more often than not, it was things that it would seem like a conversation, right? A small negotiation with the person that is above in the hierarchy of you where you work would have done the trick, right? Given that that person was also reasonable. Um, but it's a tricky thing to say, hey, yeah, I want to do this, and to know that things will change for sure. You know, I think even if Amazon didn't come out and state it so bluntly like that, if you knew anything about it, you would know that things would certainly change, and your ability to negotiate by yourself, if that's something that you were inclined to want, would more or less go away, right? Because it would be in a contract what your advancement, treatment, healthcare, all of that. Did you have to sign a contract with Guitar Center?
Yes, yeah, right when you start working there. And what I would say though is that where it was great and why one of the things that made joining a union so appealing at the time is one was shitty healthcare, shitty pay, but also like Illinois is an at will state. So anytime if a manager just didn't like you, and we had tons of not good managers, we had tons of good ones too, but we had tons of shitty managers in the history there. If they didn't like you, they could fire you for zero reason, and that's in many states. That's not like a revelation, some new thing. That's just at will employment. But they could fire you for literally no reason,
Yeah.
and and having a union in place stops that because you have to have documentation of a record of this and this. But what that leads to then when you bring the union into it, and what I found from sitting in on a million of these things, they'll start writing people up for any little infraction because they want that track record so that if that day comes when you piss them off or whatever, they can fire you. But like I'm talking about these lawyers that we negotiated with, I'm sitting at a table and we're here bargaining about this day that we were there. We were bargaining about points for being late, basically.
Okay.
Which in Chicago, like most people take public transit to get to work. Like not a lot of people had cars, especially the younger workforce there. Like they're in college, they get free train passes through the colleges. That's what's worked out.
Mhm.
But as a result, a lot of times you're dealing with like people that are late, 5, 10 minutes late. Like just shit happens during a public transit route. Like that's very normal. You got a homeless guy that holds up the train or whatever, and we're sitting at this meeting negotiating with them for which they show up 2 hours late to a meeting about infractions for being late, and they're arguing that you should basically be able to be late 5 times or you're fired in a
Mm.
year, which is just ridiculous. It's just not reasonable. There's a 2 minute like leeway period, but it's like we're here trying to fight for like what about 5 to 10 minutes? Like that's more reasonable in a city. You guys were 2 hours late for this meeting. Like shit happens, you
Right,
know.
right,
Like
right. Yeah, no, and I think
listen.
from my perspective on this is that I think the majority of like modern human history where people have been employed, um, those jobs hold more power than I think the employee appreciates.
Mm,
And I agree with the transaction that I have a contract to where I'm going to give you my labor. And if for any reason you want to rip that contract up, fine. You have that ability. But if for any reason I don't want to work for you anymore, then I can also rip up that contract. No questions asked. I'm
but you
done.
don't see much though, because like 2 weeks notice is like the standard. But
Well, that's a courtesy, but you don't need to do that.
right,
But what's interesting about what we're arguing, what we're talking about right now is that, right, the power of a job. And right now, the the power of a job is higher than it's probably ever been in history. I don't know if you saw the jobs report that came out today, but
no,
we added 266,000 jobs in April. Okay,
well,
which is a good amount, but estimates were that it was going to get much higher than that. The reason the estimates were that it was going to be as high as 1 million jobs gained in the month of April is because there's so many jobs open,
hmm,
and employers can't find employment, and it is so bizarre. The economy, we've talked about this previously, it's red hot right now
yeah,
as it's coming out of this pandemic. People are spending a ton of money. You're getting a ton of vaccines. Lockdowns are coming down more or less across the entire country, and all of this federal spending is coming together to just break us out of COVID. But what we're finding out is that the people that got laid off aren't going back to work. Either they don't have the initiative, or they have incentives, monetary incentives not to. They get paid more to not be at
yeah.
work.
I've got several friends that are on unemployment that say they make more now than they did when they worked 40 hours a week. So what is yeah, what is your incentive to
That,
go?
like, this the simplest explanation for any of this. And I think Florida just, yeah, like Florida just yesterday signed a bill that said that they were going to cut down heavily on unemployment aid for this very reason. There's a lot of people saying they're not going to go to work because they have fear of getting COVID, right? That might be a good excuse to stay on the government dole.
Yeah, I could see that.
But when you see so many job open signs everywhere,
Hmm.
and you're not seeing the response in the job market match the demand, even though you have the workers available, man, that just kind of paves a rocky road ahead for us. It's hard to tell when this is going to change.
You think that's because though, like, why would they go back to their shitty job working at like a 7-Eleven when they could stay at home and make more? Like, what is
Yeah,
their
yeah,
incentive?
yeah,
Like, to me, it's almost like, do we need to set up some kind of standard? Um, obviously there's minimum wage, but like a standard for employment so that you don't have to bring in these unions and do all this stuff to kind of tie it back to Amazon. But like, you have a wage that's livable. You have healthcare benefits. You have all these things that like should be in place to make it a worthwhile workplace, no matter where you work. You know, like you think that's a reasonable thing to ask, and like maybe something that would bring more people back to the workforce instead of staying at home and making more off unemployment.
I mean, I think we're talking about those jobs. I think a majority of jobs now in I mean, especially in California, but across the United States are rising up either by virtue of being, good stewards of their employees, or by law, be it state or federal, that they need to rise up their benefit package to their employees. And you know all all of these companies provide pretty decent benefits when you're talking about pay, healthcare, and sort of just the basic, necessities of living, of having a job. I
Mm-hmm.
really think that it's just the ability to not work. If you're
Yeah.
giving the person the ability to not work, then you're going to have to go ask them to do some menial labor that is unattractive and that doesn't fulfill many people, but it's labor. And the only other way you would get that money if you didn't have a job would be from the government. And so, you know, I mean, does it suck to work at a 7-Eleven, or would it like really be shitty to apply for a job at a KFC? Like, yeah, it would. It wouldn't be fun. But I think, just personally, I mean, depending on what you're doing, if you're not working, but as if you're contributing something, even if it's providing chicken to people, that is something. It's not nothing. And I think the majority of people are doing nothing.
But tell that to the guy selling the chicken, though. You know what I mean? Like, in that position, I'd rather be fucking home playing Xbox, doing whatever the fuck, instead of working next to a fucking grease fryer making $10 an hour.
That's fine.
You know
That's
what I
fine.
mean?
But you wouldn't be saying that if you didn't have any other options,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you want to make that a better situation for yourself, you're in a good place to do it. But that's the incentive that you have to bring to the table. You have to bring that initiative
Sure.
that, hey, I'm
And that's
here.
also the first step to a better job because it's like you at least have a
Right.
work history instead of, hey, I was unemployed for the last 4 years because it worked out pretty well for me.
And if you want something that's more fulfilling, but all you can find is that, well, then there you go. There's your starting point. There's your building block. But to me, it's pretty clear cut that there is the availability for income outside of unemployment benefits for a lot of people. And I think we need to start allowing a lot of people to stop riding that wave.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to say, right? Because who am I with a job, and I've had a job throughout this whole thing, and it's not a terrible job, you know? That's a
Hmm.
tough thing. It's a tough thing to say, and it's a tough thing for people to hear. But when you look at numbers like this, I don't know how you can come to any other reasonable conclusion.
Yeah, and it just it piles on and on and on. It scares me for the next 3.5 years or whatever, man. Because it's like, not only do we have a $1.8 trillion, you know, education reform kind of package bill on the table, like this shit isn't free. How long is this going to go on? Like that's tax dollars that pay unemployment, that pay like welfare. Like I'm sure those numbers are higher than they've ever been, and it's like the the left has open season for the next 3.5 years to pretty much pass whatever the hell they want and put more of those things into effect.
Well, maybe the next
Um,
like 12 to 15 months, but
you think that the Senate will flip?
oh,
Or
it's almost guaranteed.
oh yeah, okay,
It's almost
I didn't.
historically, it's the phenomenon is that if you have the House and Congress, I mean, if you have Congress and the White House, and
Mhm.
in a presidential election and the next midterm election, it almost always swaps. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a large reason why things are trying to move so fast in the current administration, just because they don't have a ton of time
Clock
to.
ticking. Yeah. Well, he's doing. Speaking of the administration, he made a pretty controversial decision today. It seems.
Yeah, he did. And I think it was, yeah, it was yesterday.
Mm.
Um President Biden decided to um, endorse a patent waiver for COVID vaccines. And what that means is that the companies that made the vaccines, particularly Pfizer, Moderna, BioNTech, AstraZeneca, they all did so by filing a patent. They developed the technology, the science, they tested it, and they patented it. Patents might be the most important structure of our American economy throughout the entire history of it. It allowed people the incentive to innovate,
Mm.
right? In this case, the ability to innovate a vaccine to literally save this country from a pandemic that has killed hundreds of thousands of people, right? It's a very big deal. And they had a very big financial incentive through the patent to do this. And in one fell swoop, President Biden has destroyed tens of billions of dollars in US intellectual property. And you could make the argument that you want to do this because you need the world to get more vaccines sooner. But what it does is it sets an incredibly dangerous and destructive precedent that is going to reduce investment in pharmaceuticals. A lot of people like to talk about the pharmaceutical industry and how much money is involved in it because it is a ridiculous amount. But as somebody who's been pretty close to the biotech and pharmaceutical epicenter of at least California, if not the country, here in San Diego and in Torrey Pines and La Jolla, I've worked with dozens of these companies, and it takes so much money, and people lose tens of millions of dollars at a time investing in companies who think they might have the next big thing. And if
Mm.
you decided to make an investment in Pfizer or BioNTech or any of these companies that had developed this vaccine, then you made out. And the only reason you're able to make out, and the only reason you're able to incentivize these companies to do this is because you're protected by the patent. And when you take that away in the name of doing good, particularly in other countries that don't have this vaccine, then what you're saying is next time we have a pandemic, you're open to losing your patent and billions of dollars. And who's going to invest in that? Who's going to take that risk? Who's going to guarantee that's not going to happen? And it's just, it really is just such a boneheaded move.
So yeah, how is he defending it? Like, how is he? I'm sure he's spinning it in a way. Like, what is the Democratic spin on this? Like, the reason for doing this?
Okay. So the proponent would say you're breaking these patent protections is necessary to expand the global access to vaccines. Okay. Meaning places like India and other impoverished countries that don't have the vaccine yet
Uh huh.
will be able to get it. Right.
But why couldn't Pfizer just send their vaccine to India?
Well, you could, right?
Uh huh.
But that's not necessarily how it works in the global pharmaceutical world, right?
Good.
You
Okay.
have people like the World Trade Organization, right? They step in because you need to pass these things through country lines, and so
Oh,
they
okay.
had a rule already that that these low income countries could force drug makers to license their patents during emergencies. So you these impoverished countries go to these drug makers and they say, hey, we need this patent. Can you license it to us? They don't even have to ask. They can just say, hey, we're in an emergency. We need this patent. So they license it, but they get paid for it.
Hmm.
And US and European drug companies have already volunteered to enter into dozens of these licensing agreements with other manufacturers in these countries. And they, you can't help you can't help these countries. They have to pull their own weight as far as manufacturing these things, but they have the ability to get the license to the patent so they can do it themselves. Um, People like Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca, they make a ton of these, but they don't make enough for the world. I mean, we're talking about the entire planet. That's a lot. So you're going to need to rely on these countries to take these licenses and then make them in their country. And um, and we've already committed 4 billion to distribute $4 billion to distribute 2 billion doses to these impoverished countries. So it's like, what more can we do to help? And you've just ripped the patent from underneath these companies' feet, and I cannot see the logic in it. I just can't. And I would really love if anybody is listening to just tell me why this is a good idea for the future of this country, because I think that once you do this, once you rip that from these companies, then going forward, who's gonna who's gonna want to invest?
Yeah, the next pandemic, we're gonna go to Pfizer and then be like, we're good.
Yeah, or
That,
anything. I don't know, man. You don't. It's much harder to put the genie back in the bottle,
yeah,
and so it's quite frustrating. And if you want, you might cry foul about it and just say, "How dare you? These countries need it. To hell with you." Why? Like, imagine feeling sorry for a multi-billion-dollar multi conglomerate, and it's like, yeah, I get it. And will this hurt them and their ability to move forward? No, they got money, but it's not about that. It is about what it means for the innovation and the respect that we should have for intellectual property for these companies. And yeah, foul move, all around terrible. I don't like it, not one bit.
I would really be interested to hear the other side of that. Please, somebody write in if you disagree with us, because I want to hear the counter argument. Because like as it's presented, it's like, dude, that just seems like the dumbest thing we could do for no reason. Like if we want to help globally, sure, but like we have a good patent. This company just saved our country. Like these companies just saved our country. Like helped us from a recession, helped us get jobs, like businesses back open, people back to work for the most part.
Yeah,
um, and now we're just like, hey, thanks, appreciate that. Now we're gonna shift whatever has been working, I guess.
and if you were a competent leader, you might do something like negotiate an agreement with a country to export our excess supply, because there's plenty of us who don't want to take it. Like, that's been well documented.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard about Nick Saban. He just got recruited by the state of Alabama as their highest paid employee to incentivize Alabamans to get the damn vaccine, because a lot of them don't want it. And what
Was
they're
that gonna
trying
be
to
like a
do.
TV commercial? Like, hi, I'm Nick Saban.
Nah, well, maybe.
What
Get
the
the
fuck?
fucking vaccine.
Yeah, you want me to
Uh,
tank this football team? Nah, get the vaccine.
no, I think they're just going to be like, hey, we need to have a full stadium this fall for
Oh, okay.
football, and we
Yep.
can't do that without your support. So go out there, get vaccinated, roll tide. That's
It's a
literally all
smart
he did.
strategy. Those people fucking love Alabama.
Yeah,
So
their
probably
their vaccination rate would jump 25% in like a week if you just said those words. Yeah, it's
I can go
ridiculous.
scream Roll Tide with 20,000 other people that are screaming it. I'm in.
Um, I think it just boils down to incompetent leadership, man.
Yeah.
You need to do something about protecting what we've always protected, and never use an excuse, and never overstep. Don't overreach your power and then pull at our heartstrings for it. I mean, I know that's what politicians are the best at, right? Doing shitty stuff and then making us believe that it's for the right reason. But this is not, and it just needs intellectual property needs to remain protected at all costs, because innovation is the driver of everything that we do. And if we lose that, we have nothing.
It's a smart statement, Frank. You have them from time to time.
Thank you.
Kind of similar to that in a way. As far as the internet and tech companies go, have you been following kind of the news that came out with this net neutrality and some of the information they uncovered this
I
past week?
haven't heard anything about it.
Very interesting. I'll kind of refresh everyone out there if you don't know what net neutrality is or you haven't heard it for a while. It's kind of been out of the public spotlight for a little bit. But basically, net neutrality is the principle that internet service providers, ISPs, must treat internet communication equally and not discriminate or charge differently based on who the user is, what the content is, where website, platform, application, all kinds. The list goes on. But basically, internet service providers need to keep the internet free, and you can't start introducing tiers and charging people and like monetizing the internet, basically.
Would that mean like you get? I mean, that's kind of how they do it now, right? You pay for the speed. Is that what it's saying?
So you pay for the speed, but you don't. So with net neutrality, ISPs like are not allowed to intentionally block, slow down, charge money for specific online content.
Oh, I see. So
That's what net neutrality is. Without it, ISPs could like prioritize certain types of traffic, certain people that pay way more could get way faster speeds.
yeah.
Or could go to certain websites that certain people just couldn't. Like they could literally just be like, hey, if you don't pay $30 a month, you can't go to ESPN.com or Facebook. You can't access it. Sorry. So it was a hot issue quite a few years back, and it kind of seems like it's died down. It's still very much a thing, and it's kind of a fight. But I think it was in 2019. I think it came before the House, and a bill passed the House, like basically, 2019, the Save the Internet Act. It passed through the House, but it got shut down in the Senate. So it's like still kind of in limbo. But basically, like proponents of net neutrality, which would include like human rights activists that do that, invented it, Tim Berners-Lee, among many others. They assert that net neutrality helps to provide freedom of information exchange, promotes competition and innovation for internet services, and upholds standardization of internet data transmission, which is essential for like the growth of the internet. And there's a lot of companies that have got behind that: Yahoo, eBay, Amazon, Microsoft, Reddit, Twitter, Tumblr, Etsy, bunch more. But those are the main like people fighting for it. And even in 2008, Google equated the situation to that of like the telephony market, telephones, where like imagine if telephone companies were able to control who their customers called or what those customers were allowed to say on the call.
Mm.
That's basically what getting rid of net neutrality would kind of be. So and then you obviously have the other side. So opponents of net neutrality, which obviously include these ISPs, telecom equipment companies like manufacturers, they argue that net neutrality requirements would reduce their incentive to build out their internet infrastructure, their system for supporting this huge thing that is the internet. They think that it reduces competition in the marketplace and may raise their operating costs. Companies like Comcast, AT&T, Verizon, IBM, Intel, Cisco, Nokia, big companies that are very integrated into everything that we do. So really hot topic. I could go on and on about it, but basically what these opponents to net neutrality are saying is that companies like a Google and a Skype and a Netflix, which use the internet as their operating platform, yet don't contribute to this infrastructure of what makes the internet possible. Which is, I could see that. I definitely could see that. Like, you're telling me Google doesn't like do anything to support the internet, which is like they've got to be the biggest site on there.
I mean, outside of the outrageous demand for their products, which might incentivize people to. See, that's the thing about ISPs is that they sort of more or less hold a monopoly on their areas, right? Like my choice right now is AT&T and Cox, and then I don't know. I'm sure there's another one out there. And when I was living in downtown, I could only get Google Fiber. It's the
Yes.
only internet that I could use, which it was fine, but it was the only way I could use. So they kind of have a monopoly on it. And um, you know, if there was more competition, maybe you might see the infrastructure get better, maybe you might not. But I think Google's playing their part in all these, like even like Netflix and anybody who has
Yeah.
like the crazy demand for their product or their website, you know, might incentivize a normal company to invest in that infrastructure because they know it's going to be used forever, or at least for the
Sure.
foreseeable future. But
But
I
the
get the
ISPs
other.
are basically saying if we can't monetize off of the internet, like we can't keep growing the infrastructure to support it.
That's not well. Maybe if I could hear the argument that if you wanted to take that sort of infrastructure weight off of the federal government shoulders and make it a more or less privatized industry and allow for competition and allow for, because I can see that the way I'm envisioning the argument is that you have somebody that can supply internet to you if you just want to like send emails and nothing less,
Mhm.
or it could send you a giant amount of broadband for one reason or another and just making it like hyper um selective, giving you tons of options on how you want to consume your internet. Because right now we only have about three or four, right? When you sign up for an internet provider, you have like three or four tiers and you choose what makes sense, and then you're off. So I mean I hear both sides to it, but keep
Yeah, some proponents even want to make it like become like a federally standardized thing, so like the government would control the internet, which I think is probably like the worst idea ever.
yeah, right. That sounds terrible. That sounds like that literally sounds like China.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So, yesterday, so some developing news when this was all going on back a few years ago, and in 2019, a lot of these votes were going on to try to push a bill through to enable some kind of structure for everything. A lot of people were writing into the FCC to like give their opinion on it, and maybe like help sway what was going on, just so that like our politicians could really see what the American people thought. So yesterday, the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, announced that nearly 18 million out of the 22 million comments that they received were entirely fabricated.
Hmm.
So about 8.5 million of them they found were actually ISP companies that wanted to manufacture support for the repeal of the existing net neutrality rules, just to make it look like there was more people in support of that. They also found that a single 19-year-old college student in California who was pursuing a degree in computer science submitted 7.7 million pro net neutrality comments under fake randomly generated names.
Hilarious.
The problem is that the ISPs were using real people's names without their consent at all. And with the way they did this is they hired third-party firms to like fake consent records. It basically, if anything was followed up on, these companies would step in and fake the consent for them. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's
Damn.
not good. The California kid who was doing it in the reverse did not do that. His were just randomly generated names. So that is like where the big issue comes into play here. But it is astounding that only 4 million people out of the 22 million people were like actual people.
How many comments did that one kid?
He did 7.7 million himself.
Man, way to
I
spread it out.
8.5 million.
What a bunch of morons.
Yeah.
It does
So,
not look suspicious. Right, 7.5 million of them.
yeah.
That can all get traced back to you.
Mm-hmm. So the Attorney General's report said the industry campaign was run through Broadband for America, which is like an umbrella group that includes all these ISPs: Comcast, Charter, AT&T, Cox, CenturyLink, Verizon's also like associated with them.
Damn.
But so this is even, it gets crazier. So like with the broadband like with these companies hiring a third party vendor to do this, they are like totally not liable for anything. They didn't have direct knowledge of what they were, of this like fraudulent behavior that they were doing. So basically they paid them $8 million like for this campaign and washed their hands clean of it, and they took care of all like the shitty, like fraudulent kind of things that they did, and we had no idea. We just gave this company this money.
So you can't directly link them with the egregious act of using real people's names. Therefore, they are not held liable. Is what you're saying?
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
Sounds like a corporation to me.
So while
Sounds
the
like
numbers
an
of fake
employer.
comments were like roughly equal in supporting and opposing net neutrality, the Attorney General's report basically said that the industry's campaign to generate fake comments opposing net neutrality and using people's actual identities is very, very illegal, and that action should be taken. So
Well, we'll see, man. That's wild.
yeah, good on that one kid though, dude.
No,
He did
seriously.
7.7 million, and they're paying some
Yeah.
companies $8 million to do what he did by himself.
Get him a contract now. Hey, you know what I hate?
What's that?
Segways.
Yeah, you're
So
pretty good at it, though.
we got one more story for you today, and that is the story of the secret of happiness.
Mm.
And we know it. They've told it to us straight. If I can find what I'm looking for. So they asked the question. There's a Danish concept, and it's called Higgy. How do you pronounce this?
Look at this research.
You hear that? Huga
Huga. Okay.
is, and they asked, is Huga still a thing? Huga is a Danish concept of what they call comfortable conviviality, all things cozy. They capture the essence of their culture. And the Danish said that that's their secret for happy living. And the reason that it kind of gained in popularity because they've been the happiest country in the world for a long time, as the World Happiness Report has been keeping these records. And Finland has taken over as the world's happiest country for the past 4 years, taken over Denmark. And their equivalent to what Hygge is something way less cozy. And I don't even know how to pronounce this word. It's called Kalsaraklana. I don't know. What it translates to is pants drunk. It refers to the practice of binge drinking home alone in your underpants,
Okay.
which Al might call a Tuesday. Basically, what they're saying is if this is the secret to a happy life, if that's your secret to a happy life, keep it a secret.
Mm.
Okay. So, and they're skeptical about it. The Finns, they're very skeptical about this notion that they're the happiest country in the world. And, they're not a blissful nation. It's not, you don't go to Finland and it's just like a bunch of bright, happy people. They're very, and as described by the author here, a Finn, their natural state is brooding and private, grimly in touch with no one but themselves and the shyest people on earth, depressed and proud of it. End quote. So, when they do these polls, these happiness reports, they ask a very simple question. Okay. They say, imagine a ladder with steps numbered from 0 to 10. Top rung represents the best possible life, bottom rung represents worst. And where do you put yourself? And that's one of the ways that they
Pretty
describe it.
straightforward. Yeah. Yeah.
What is, how happy do you feel in your homeland? And by all accounts, things in Finland aren't terrible. There's not a high poverty rate. There's not a lot of homelessness. Deprivation isn't a common thing in Finland. They do have universal access to education and healthcare, and they give a bunch of vacation. It's a common occurrence to have long vacations. But according to this Finn, writing this article, the secret to happiness. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
Is that we should not ignore expectations. They go by this law of jaunt, set of commandments, believed to capture something essential about this Nordic way of living. You're not to think that you're anything special. You're not to imagine yourself better than you are, and you're not to think you're good at anything. And that's how these people live their life. Um, and people are socialized in this country to believe that that what they have is as good as it gets, or close enough. So literally, their secret to happiness is don't have any expectations. Um,
So do you think that like just to compare it like to us, where we're like we're America, we're the land of the free, we're the best country in the world. That's
we
like
aspire to a lot, but we also aspire to consumerism. We're
yeah.
gluttonous, fat, angry, pissed off, impatient people. Most of us. There's a good chunk of us who are not.
Mhm.
Um, but overall, if you were to ask somebody their opinion of an American, I would believe that that's their response, right? Fast
Yeah.
moving, high wired, shoot for the stars, because if you miss, you'll land on the moon, right? Like go for it always. Um, and they picked a term in this article, lagom, which can be translated to as just the right amount. And they believe that that's the best way to encapsulate a Nordic way of living, or how they maintain their happiness. And it's essentially just an embracement of modesty and like an overall rejection of excess.
Hmm.
Um, so there it is. Don't have any expectations. Don't think you're good. Can you imagine imagine going to a child. Imagine going to you have nieces, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Imagine going to your niece. How old is she? 5?
4 and 2.
Perfect. Go to the 4-year-old and say, hey, you are not to think that you're anything special. You're not to imagine yourself as better than you are, and you're not to think that you're good at anything.
Pretty sobering, yeah.
Yeah, dude, your sister-in-law is going to kick your ass.
Right.
You kidding me? Um, you could probably boil that down to humility, humbleness, being humble.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm sure it's like pitched or taught a little bit softer than that though. Like in schools, like I'm sure they like word it in a way that's not just so like, hey, you're not shit.
yeah, maybe or maybe not.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
ever
yeah, yeah.
used to
Maybe the
be, ever
directness.
used to be a good thing to tell somebody that, to try and sober them up. Somebody who just got a big head. Hey, you're not shit.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't think you're anything better than you are, because you're just a guy.
Yeah, that's like the idea of like an intervention too for like a drug addict.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and just think of the things that we put pressure on ourselves about, and they're nothing. You know,
Yeah.
they're nothing. They're cosmetic. They're materialistic. The values of having just enough no longer apply here, because we have way more than enough.
I
And
would say capitalism is like a direct driving factor of that
well,
though.
100%, man. I mean, if you have a society whose sole purpose is to advance forward, and the major driver of innovation is profit,
Yeah.
then yeah, 100%. And it's a good thing, right? In a way, because you know we have redefined what it means to be in poverty. We've risen a giant portion of our population out of poverty. We've created more wealth than any nation could have possibly fathomed.
Yeah.
But when we stop believing that we're just a man or just a woman or just a human, and take a step back and recognize that there is really nothing about us that should allow us to think that our shit doesn't stink. um
Mhm.
then yeah, who's to say that grab for materialistic pleasure or materialistic wealth is going to make you happy? I think time and time again, the only story that you hear is that it does the opposite. So lower your expectations. don't don't expect anything.
You're
I
not.
think that's it.
Yeah. That's not what I thought you were gonna say, man. But
Yeah,
I definitely could see that. Yeah.
it's
Quick.
not masturbating, Al. That's not the secret to happiness. Although you're an American, you get to define that yourself. So far be it from me to say anything to the contrary.
Oh well, quick before we go, we're up against it, but I did just want to like touch on the UFOs real quick from the last episode. We kind of jumped into it, and I mentioned there was some language in a recent bill that went through in during the COVID bill, and I just kind of wanted to clarify that because I don't like to speak loosely very often. Although I'm sure I will continue to do so. So there'll probably be more updates like this coming. But anyway, so the exact language that was in this in the bill made a comment on advanced aerial threats. And the committee, what they said word for word here, I'm just going to read it. The committee supports the efforts of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force at the Office of Naval Intelligence to standardize collection and reporting on unidentified aerial phenomenon. Any links that they have to adversarial, there we go, foreign governments and the threat they pose to U.S. military assets and installations. However, the committee remains concerned that there is no unified, comprehensive process within the federal government for collecting and analyzing intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomenon despite the potential threat. And it goes on from there to basically say, like, we need to, like, have this organized, have some kind of, like, agency really handling these things.
So, in other words, the secrecy surrounding the spotting of UFOs is not to the benefit of anybody in this country. And in fact, it could put us in a detrimental position if we don't start to organize the information that we have on things that we can't understand.
Yeah, that way it can properly be addressed, because like the fear is that there are high up people in the government, within the CIA and the NSA, and above, that are maybe have knowledge that is above the president, even where there are things that, like, we cannot let people know. We need to govern these things ourselves. This is how it has to go. There's very many claims to that. So I think that they're trying to address that as best they can through government. So this is the first step. But since the 180-day requirement was set into motion, which is when Trump signed this bill on December 27th, the CIA has already released more than 2,700 pages of documents that detail UFO accounts from the 40s all the way to the 90s. And they're still releasing stuff daily. They still have, I don't even know how many days have passed. I think it's like 2 more months to get everything out. But you can go and look at this stuff yourself if you're interested in it, like me. I could sit there for hours, and you can just read through account after account after account of all these different people, all this information that we've collected over the years. It's really, really interesting.
Discount any of the experiences that people have experienced, but I can't help but think that, like, people are pouring through these documents, and like one of every 3 or 4 of these reportings is just somebody, like, at night or like early in the morning without their glasses on, looking at a crop duster. Just like very obviously not a UFO or something that we could very easily just like, fuck, here's another.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, if this data goes back to the 1940s, people have been bullshitting, and I mean, humans we are faulted with errors. So
we're also, like, I'm sure we've run operations as a government with things that maybe are common today but weren't common back then, and people saw it and were like, what in the
right.
Have you ever seen an LCAC driving on the 5 freeway going north right before you hit the San Onofre titties? If you know what I'm talking, you know. And there's LCAC, it's like a hovercraft, it's got 2 propellers on each side thing in the middle. If you didn't know what that was, and that was a secret to the United States or to the general public, you'd shit your pants.
Yeah.
So crazy. Like I said, I don't want to discount. I'm sure people have a bunch of legit.
Yeah, I'm sure some of these are complete bullshit, but I mean, even if half of them or whatever are true, like there are unidentified flying objects, and it's just cool. So if you have time, we'll post it up on our Twitter. I'll post the link to the CIA's website. You can literally go through and read through all of these, and I will leave the caveat: the U.S. government is still able to classify and not release certain documents here. Like, they are not being forced to release everything. So I'm sure any very big revealing thing that could change whatever is nothing that you'll find here. But it's still just cool to read UFO accounts and stuff that our government has collected and sat on for years. It's cool to, like, see that actually released. So
if the next Republican nominee for president in 2024, whoever that is, if they promise to release the JFK files, they got my vote.
Shit, JFK got killed for that, man. No
That's all
one's
they need.
touched it since then. I don't think you'll see anyone do that for a while. And that's also why people claim that they stopped sharing those details with presidents a long time ago, because it can lead to assassinations potentially.
Well,
that's hearsay. We'll see. But if you have time, definitely go online and check out the FLIR1 video, the Gimbal GIMBAL video, and the GOFAST video. They were published by the New York Times back in 2017, 2018. They're pretty cool videos just to watch. Some proof of UFOs. If you get a second, go check them out. And definitely check out the link on our Twitter for the CIA and all the documents.
Also check out our Twitter feed.
Ooh.
At Friendship NH on Twitter, at Friendship News Hour on Instagram.
And as always, you can send us comments, questions, concerns, reviews, whatever you want to send us, really. You could just send us a picture of yourself and say hi. We'd love it. bummerdude.media@gmail.com. We will be sure to answer you there or on any of our platforms. And we really appreciate you guys listening. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Wish your mom a happy Mother's Day. Do something nice for her on Sunday. Yeah, and we'll see you next week.
Go Padres.